It was a warm summer day in 2020. The charming town of Wattens in Austria appeared to be quieter than usual. Normally, hundreds of thousands of tourists would flock to the region to see the beautiful Austrian Alps every year. But with the unexpected pandemic, Austrian tourism really took a hit. Wattens also happens to be the home to the world-renowned jewelry company Swarovski. Other than the Alps, tourists from around the world would come to explore the Swarovski Crystal Worlds, the company's headquarters and corporate museum. The experience attraction features crystal-stubbed exhibits, oversized crystal chandeliers, and glitzy art installations. Since its opening in 1995, more than 15 million visitors have made their way to catch a glimpse at this sparkling, crystalline wonder. But this year, tourism slowed down and admissions severely suffered. Seems like the crystal sparkle can't even save the bitter economy. But back in the office headquarters of Swarovski, management wasn't too concerned about the slowdown of visitors at their museum. Rather, they were occupied worrying about the company's glooming future. The year 2020 marked the 125th anniversary of Swarovski, but there's little to celebrate. Revenue was down 30% from 2.7 billion euros to about 1.9 billion. 750 of its 3,000 stores were closed worldwide. 1,500 employees in Wattens lost their jobs last year, and 600 more expected to go in the next 2 years. The plan was to eliminate 6,000 positions, which was about 20% of the company's total workforce. CEO Robert Buchbauer once said, "We are forced to reimagine and rescale our entire Swarovski business, or we'll end up among the losers." The pandemic might have exacerbated the decline of Swarovski, but the founding family drama over power and control pushed the company into a downward spiral of stagnation and failure. Is this really the end for the century-old crystal kingdom? Can Swarovski navigate its way through the most significant industry downturn in history? On October 24, 1862, Daniel Swarovski was born in a small village in North Bohemia, which belonged to the Austrian Empire at the time. Like many in the area, Daniel's father was a skilled glass cutter and he owned a small glass workshop. Young Daniel took up the art of glass cutting from helping at the workshop, but he dreamed of being a violinist all this time. Later in life, Daniel spent years abroad in Paris as a student of music, but it was a trip to the International Electricity Exhibition in Vienna that changed his life. There, he learned about electricity and technology for the very first time. He was fascinated by how electricity could power machines to improve precision and accuracy. At the time, glass cutting was a very manual craft, but he had an idea that could revolutionize the whole industry. Years went by, and almost 10 years later, Swarovski gave up his pursuit in music. Instead, he combined his newfound passion in electricity and skills as a glass cutter to invent the world's first electric cutting machine in 1892. Initially, Daniel wanted to try his luck with entrepreneurship back in his hometown. North Bohemia was famous for its crystal glass masters. Daniel thought he would make a killing by surrounding himself with the right people and customers. But as news about his machine spread like wildfire across the village, he began to realize his fellow craftsmen were his foes and not his friends. People were trying to copy his machine and steal his formula. With the growing competition, Swarovski knew he had to move away. He eventually went to the village of Wattens. It was there where Daniel Swarovski founded the first factory. After meeting with a few business partners, he officially established the Swarovski Company in 1895. Daniel's machine was pivotal to the founding of the company. This electric machine allowed precision cuts that produced crystals that sparkled so brilliantly they were often confused with actual diamonds. However, he had always been very protective of his invention and formula. Even today, very little is known about how Swarovski makes the crystals. The exact proportion of these ingredients has remained the company's deepest secret, and the process has been patented by Daniel Swarovski since 1895. The company's manufacturing center is usually off-limits, even to most Swarovski employees. It's guarded by a high-security revolving door that the New York Times once described as something that would not seem out of place in a spy movie. Before Swarovski, Europeans had a unique love affair with diamonds for decades, but diamonds' beauty and rarity also came with a hefty price tag. Only a few selected in society were able to afford them. When Swarovski's company first launched the production of crystal stones, it became a great hit in an instant. While the crystals imitated the sparkle and appearance of precious stones, they were much more affordable than diamonds to many middle-class people. Soon after the release, the demand for Swarovski crystals skyrocketed. They became fashion accessories, and the company was swamped with orders. This sudden surge of popularity stimulated the company's expansion and growth, and Swarovski slowly became a household name outside of the Austrian Empire as well. From Paris to St. Petersburg, Europeans everywhere fell in love with their products. Even the elites began to turn their heads to Swarovski's crystals and added them to their own collections. In 1908, 3 sons of Daniel joined the company, and from then on, Swarovski evolved from a small crystal workshop to a business family dynasty. As the company continued to grow, Daniel laid down many commands and visions for Swarovski and its future. One of the visions he had was to create a diamond for everyone. He believed that luxury should be affordable and everyone should be able to experience a sense of wonder and bring a little glamour into their lives. Today, Swarovski is known as an affordable luxury brand, all thanks to Daniel's vision. Other than affordable pricing, Daniel had another important command. He demanded that Swarovski shall only be run by the heirs of his 3 sons. As the founder, Daniel entrusted that his descendants would take good care of the company, but little did he know this command only opened a Pandora's box of family drama and conflicts for years to come. Then the Golden 20s came along after the First World War. The fashion industry in Europe took off, and designers began to pay closer attention to Swarovski's crystals. Popular designers such as Coco Chanel, Christian Dior, and other Hollywood designers snapped up all the designs. They liked to experiment and adorn their belts, bags, and fabrics with sparkling crystals. What set Swarovski apart from its competitors was noticeably how much brighter their crystals had shined. Designers found it hard to distinguish them from diamonds. With the help of innovative fashion trends, the company gained further popularity, and its crystal products became a common accessory in the world of high fashion and performance. In the 1950s, Swarovski made its major debut on the big screen. Remembered as an icon of elegance and beauty of her generation, actress Marilyn Monroe wore Swarovski in her hit movie Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. No one could forget her pink dress and all of her dazzling jewelry she wore playing the role of Lorelei Lee in this classic musical comedy. Marilyn also wore a gown covered in 2,500 Swarovski crystals when she sang Happy Birthday, Mr. President to John F. Kennedy on live television. The gown was eventually sold at a Los Angeles auction in November of 2016. It reached a record price of $4.8 million US. Another movie icon that brought Swarovski to the spotlight was Audrey Hepburn. Hepburn played Holly Golightly in the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, and she often wore necklaces and earrings that Swarovski made with their beautiful crystals. Thanks to the movies and pop culture, Swarovski strategically positioned itself as the jewelry powerhouse in Europe. Since then, their crystals had been intertwined with celebrities, high fashion, and the world of luxury. On January 23, 1956, Daniel Swarovski passed away. He was 93 years old. A new generation of Swarovskis rose up and took over the company's leadership. Daniel's grandson, Manfred Swarovski, took the Crystal Kingdom to new heights. Under his leadership, Swarovski began to produce luxurious crystal chandeliers. The ones in the Metropolitan Opera in New York and the Versailles Palace in France were some of their best works. But what really turned Swarovski into a bigger household name than before was actually the small collectible miniatures which were created in the 1970s to diversify the business. They were the tiny glass figurines that were originally from the chandeliers. In 1987, the Swarovski Collector Society was founded to offer collectors of Swarovski crystal exclusive benefits and services. Today, the society attracts 450,000 active members from around 35 countries. As the company continued to grow for the past century, so did the Swarovski family. It has grown from a small family of 5 into a dynasty with 200 members, many of whom are spread between Austria and Switzerland. Just as Daniel wished when he built the company, Swarovski had only been run by its own descendants. Of the 200 family members, 78 own major stake in the company and are entitled to vote. Most notably, Markus Swarovski, the great-great-grandson of Daniel, took over as the chairman of the executive board when he was only 28 in 2002. His relative, Nadja Swarovski, arguably the most famous of the clan, led the global brand strategy and communications of the business. Her father, Helmut Swarovski, and her uncle, Paul Swarovski, both also served on the executive board. Another great-great-grandson of Daniel, Robert Buchbauer, was appointed as CEO in 2020. In their 120 years of operations, they never had anyone outside the family to take on management roles. Swarovski is a family business through and through. But Swarovski is an outlier in the business. Other family-owned luxury brands have long foregone control and did not stay private for very long. A once family-owned jewelry company, Bulgari, was acquired by Louis Vuitton in 2011. High-end winter outfitters like Moncler and Canada Goose have also sold shares to the public to raise capital. Even Markus Lang Swarovski noticed that the company being in the family's control was unusual and needed a revamp. He once said in an interview in 2014, "We are still a totally family-owned and operated business, which is very untypical for fifth-generation family businesses."
Digital, media, etc. Now things are moving very, very fast.
In January 2012, on the other side of the planet, Eastman Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in New York. The once giant camera company was only 7 years older than Swarovski, but they filed because they could not withstand the test of time. Smartphones and digital cameras were taking over the industry, and the traditional camera technology was no longer popular in the market. Kodak was too complacent to innovate and eventually ran out of cash. Markus saw the news and thought that this was a wake-up call. He was concerned that Swarovski would go down the same path. Four years later, in 2016, Markus flew himself and his team to Silicon Valley in California. As the chairman of the board, he was trying to incorporate technology into the day-to-day operations of Swarovski. His team explored the options of introducing e-commerce to customers, investing millions into high-tech machinery, and even partnering up with smartwatch companies. They also hired consultants from Silicon Valley and sent executives to California to meet with venture capitalists. To attract partnerships with other tech businesses, they developed crystals that could double as solar panels or change color when tapped with a finger. He also hired a new team of engineers in Wattens to streamline the production process. Markus was haunted by Kodak's high-profile bankruptcy 4 years ago. He believed that the company needed to channel his great-great-grandfather's engineering roots to innovate and embrace technology. Otherwise, Swarovski would lose its sparkle forever. But back in the Austrian Alps, the rest of the Swarovski family were not impressed with Markus's decision. To many of them, a 120-year-old crystal giant seeking help from some young tech companies seemed like an odd strategy. They were concerned that Markus and his team were simply jumping on the tech bandwagon without doing any further research. They also feared that Markus was trying to replace their traditional heritage with some unrefined tech culture. It was hard to get the family on board, Markus once told the New York Times, and of course, it still is. One thing unique about Swarovski's corporate structure was that they never had a CEO in management. Although Markus was designated as the speaker of the executive board, he's not the boss at Swarovski. In fact, no member of the family had the sole authority to make decisions across Swarovski. The company was controlled by an executive board of 8 family members and an advisory board of 6 others. Once a month, they'd all meet to discuss management issues. Markus had admitted that managing the differences of opinions while balancing the company's profit was a challenging task. Nadja Swarovski once said in an interview, "We have to make sure we convince each other. The development would be much faster if there were a CEO, but then the question is, who's it going to be? Would it be a person with more shares or more experience or more success? We all have a different sense of entitlement." The family politics were dominating the board for years, and the tension among family members was well known in the business. There were serious conversations within the company about Swarovski going public around the same time. On one hand, an IPO could propel their business in North America and their online presence. On the other hand, it could bring in some extra cash for further research and development. But the idea of losing control didn't sit well with the family. The topic was quickly off the table. Because of the family squabbling, Markus's vision of transforming Swarovski eventually fizzled out. But their opposition wasn't unfounded. Swarovski wasn't in a bad place back in 2015. They reported $3.8 billion as annual revenue, which was a 10% increase from the previous year. The Swarovski family was skeptical how much technology could help the company. In early 2020, the overbearing family drama ultimately drove Markus out. He decided to step down from his role as chairman. In the same year, Robert Buchbauer would fill in as the CEO, the company's first official CEO. In many ways, Robert was a similar leader to Markus. He believed that the Swarovskis needed to reimagine and rescale the entire business in order to survive. The pandemic might have slowed down sales and earnings, but Swarovski also faced fierce competition from Egypt and China. Crystals made in these countries sparkle just as brightly, but for as little as 1% of the price. After years of expansion, Robert thought the company needed to restructure. Costs were going up, and their profit margins were thinning out. His great-great-grandfather's vision of a diamond for everyone would no longer be a sustainable business model. If Swarovski wanted to survive, they would need to offer fewer but more exclusive items and cut back 3,000 shops worldwide. Robert's idea for the new Swarovski was to sell more curated products to match the consumer's tastes. The entire plan would have to take 2 to 3 years to roll out. Although ambitious, Robert's plan surprisingly won overwhelming support from almost 80% of the family shareholders. Part of the plan was already underway during the year. Positions were cut, shops were closed. Robert felt good. He thought he was able to mitigate the family politics and gain power as the company's first CEO. While the revamp was going full force, 4 family members on the cabinet were plotting to remove Robert. Nadja, Helmut, Gerard, and Paul Swarovski and others objected to Robert's plan, saying that the remaining 20% of shares they own gave them the veto power. They all accused Robert of causing irreversible damage to the company. Paul Swarovski was the most outspoken against Robert. In an interview, he once said, "There are still lots of opportunities to sell billions of high-quality crystal components around the world, and Robert Buchbauer has to come up with ideas on how to gain these customers rather than shutting things down and laying off expert workers." The family wanted to stop Robert because the cuts were too deep. The tension between Robert and the board kept rising, and the family remained divided. There was a letter circulating around management calling for decisive measures and Robert to step down. Eventually, Buchbauer lost the battle to the rest of the family. In October of 2021, he withdrew himself from the day-to-day operations and officially resigned from the position of CEO. In November of 2021, just a few weeks following Robert's resignation, Swarovski appointed a few new faces to be part of the board. Each of them had extensive leadership experience. Robert Singer was the former CFO of the Gucci Group. Manuel Martinez was the chairman of the board of Bally. Annalisa Elia was a former executive at Cartier. But what's more exciting about these new members was not their strong track record of executive experience. Rather, it was the fact that none of them were related to the family of Swarovski at all. For the very first time in 126 years, Swarovski would be led by a group of non-family executives. Meanwhile, other family members would remain on the board, but they'd be less involved with the day-to-day operations. The decision was a shock to many in the industry, but it was a change that was welcomed. The founding family was hoping that the outsiders would bring new momentum and ideas, but most importantly, bring life back to Swarovski. Inviting non-family members to lead the company is a strong signal that Swarovski is open to changes and new ideas. They're willing to innovate and take the next step to further save the Crystal Kingdom from crumbling into ashes. Turns out the market competition from China and Egypt might not be the biggest enemy after all. It was their own family drama over power that stifled the growth of the company. With the weak economy still looming in the background, the future of Swarovski and its founding family remains unclear. But one thing is certain: Swarovski will go down in history as Europe's most iconic jewelry powerhouse.